Hey there, welcome to a new video. Today I'm gonna tell you all the books that I read in September and October. This is my wrap up. I know it's a little late, we're like a week into November at the point of filming this. That is okay. The first book I read is The Mysterious Bakery on Rue de Paris by Evie Woods. I read this on audiobook and I really enjoyed it. It follows Edie Lane, who goes to Paris and finds a job there in a bakery. She's not allowed to go into the basement, and it's a very, I don't want to say magical because I don't think it's actual magic, but it's like some sort of magical realism. This book is just so cozy. It was a perfect book to start off like my personal fall season. I feel like September is when I'm getting into fall, and this was the perfect book to start with, and I gave it 5 stars. And the audiobook was also really good, and Evie Woods has another book called The Lost Bookshop, I think, which I also really want to read. I read my audiobooks via Storytel, and I think her other book is also on there, and I really want to get to that soon as well. Then I read some short stories by Catherine Mansfield, but I read them for my literature class, and so I don't really have a lot to say about them other than I like them. I really like The Garden Party, which is I think her most well-known story, and her other stories were also fun, but I'm just not that much of a short story person, I think. There are some short stories that I really enjoy. In general, I just like a novel more, I think. And so I don't have a lot to say about this. I also don't give ratings to short story collections because that feels unfair. Then the next book I read is My Roommate is a Vampire by Jenna Levine. This is the first part in a 3-book romance series. At least there's 3 books out right now. I think they're interconnected, but I'm not really sure. At least they all follow a human person with a love interest being a vampire, and this book was really funny. I gave it 3 stars because I liked it. It was a fun, quick romance, but it's not the best romance that I ever read. It follows Cassie Greenberg, who moves into a new apartment because the rent is really low. She's low on money, and so she goes to rent this apartment, but there's a roommate, and the roommate is a vampire, and this book basically follows her finding out what he is. It felt a little weird in the pacing of it because I already knew it was a vampire, like it's in the title that he's a vampire, and so it felt a little slow, but it was a fun romance novel nonetheless. Then I read The Wasteland by T.S. Eliot, also for my literature class, and so I won't go into detail, but I wanted to mention it because I did actually read it in September, so it should be mentioned in my wrap-up. Then the next book I read is Shatter Me by Tahira Mafi. If you don't know yet, this book has blown up on TikTok, like years ago when it first came out. This entire series has been blown up on TikTok, I think. It follows Juliet, who has like a gift is what they call it, but she calls it a curse. When she touches people, they die, basically. So she's been locked up, and at some point she gets like taken out of her cell by this guy, and he is really horrible to her, and it's a romance, but I think it's more so a dystopian. And I started part 1 in September, and we'll get to part 1.5 to 2.5 in a little. The next book I read was for my literature class again, which is To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf. And I actually want to talk about this book because this is a full-length novel that I can mention, and I really liked it. I've been obsessed with Virginia Woolf for years now, even though I have not read any of her books up until I've read To the Lighthouse. But something about her, just I really admire her, and To the Lighthouse was really fun. It's a little difficult to read because she writes very much in a stream of consciousness type of writing, which basically means every single thought a person can have is just written out. It's all internal monologue, which is really interesting but sometimes a little difficult to get through. But I gave this 4 stars. I enjoyed this so much, and if you want to get into classics, I think this is a very good starting point. Like I said, it's a little difficult to read, but the language itself is quite easy. It's just the structure of the novel that's a little difficult, but I think you'll get used to that. And I listened to the audiobook for this for majority of the book as well, and that really helped me. That in general just really helps me when reading classics. The book follows a family called the Ramseys in, I think they live in Scotland, and it just follows them, and I think they hired a painter called Lily, and Mrs. Ramsey is a very central point of the novel, and it basically follows Mrs. Ramsey and all the relationships she has with all these different people living at her house. and it's really interesting to see all those family dynamics and the dynamics between her and the painter, and it's just a really interesting book, and I really enjoyed it, and I didn't mind reading it for literature class, because sometimes literature class books are a little, you know, I don't want to read them, but I have to, but this one I was so excited about, so all I can do is recommend it. The next book I read was Destroy Me, which is part 1.5 in the Shatter Me series. It's basically a little novella in between the first and the second book, but I don't think it's necessary to read the novellas, but I want to because it adds more to the story. I rated this 3.25 stars. Immediately after, I read Unravel Me, which is the second full-length book in the Shatter Me series, and I won't go into detail about this because it's a part 2 and I don't want to spoiler anything, but it basically follows the events right after the first book as well, but then in Juliet's POV again. Then the next book I read is... oh, I didn't read a book next. I read short stories next for my literature class again. Some short stories by Elizabeth Bowen, and again, some short stories for my literature class. I want to mention them because I did read them, but I didn't really enjoy them that much. There were 7, and there was 2 that I really liked, and the other 5 I just kind of had to read and push through. I persevered, you know, but I didn't really enjoy them that much. But in general, I'm not a short story person, so I'm not blaming poor Elizabeth Bowen for this. The next book I read is a short story again for my literature class again, but this is one of the short stories that I really enjoyed, but it's actually also quite a long short story. I think most of the short stories by Catherine Mansfield and Elizabeth Bowen, for example, that we read were like 10, 20, maybe 30 pages. But the short story that we read next, Babette's Feast, it's called, by Isaac Dinesen. It's actually written by Karen Blixen, who writes under the pen name of Isaac Dinesen. It's a Danish name, so I don't really know how to pronounce it. But we read Babette's Feast, and that's a bit of a longer short story. I think it's like 50 or 60 pages, and I think that's also why I enjoyed it more. Because, you know, you learn more about characters. And this follows 2 sisters who take in a woman who shows up at their door, and she cooks for them, and it's stuff like that. And they are the daughters of a religious dean, and it just follows their story with this woman and being the daughters of a very religiously acclaimed person in their little society. And I don't know, I just really like this story. I don't have a lot more to say. Then next I read a graphic novel because I was getting a bit burnt out from all my literature class books, and I read The Girl from the Sea by Lee Knox Ostertag. I don't know how to pronounce it, I'm sorry. I think it's a Scandinavian name, but this follows a girl. She lives on an island and she meets a girl from the sea, and her friends are not really accepting of that other girl, but the main character is actually struggling with her sexuality. I think she is lesbian or bi, at least she doesn't just like boys. So it follows her as she struggles with her sexuality and telling her friends and having her friends accept this girl that she's in love with, who is also a siren, I think she is. She's at least a girl from the sea, and so it just follows around sexuality and acceptance. I gave this 3 stars because it was really cute and a really fast read because, you know, it's a graphic novel, but it was so insta-lovey. From the beginning, they were together, and I guess it works for the kind of story that it is, but for me it just felt a little fast because they were like in love from page 1. The next book I read is for my literature class again. It's Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe. I have it on my screen here, but I don't know how to pronounce his name. It's a Nigerian name, or at least an African name, and it follows Okonkwo as he is the leader of his like clan in Nigeria, and it just follows him in relation to the other clans in the neighborhood. And at some point British colonizers come in and they want to spread the Christian faith, and then Okonkwo is very much against that, and it just follows the story of a Nigerian clan. I rated this 3.25 stars because I think it's really important for me to read stories about non-European people. I mean, it was an interesting story, but it wasn't my favorite. Can I say that? I think I can say that. I didn't really enjoy it that much, but I do think it's important to read these types of books as a white person from, you know, Western Europe. This just wasn't the book for me. And the next book I read is actually in a video that's coming up, so I won't talk about it now, but I'll talk about it in that video. It's my boyfriend and best friends picking books for me to read, so I'll talk about it there. It's the book that my boyfriend picked. Then the next book I read was in a readathon with my friends. I read The Apple Pie Ice Cream Parlor. So in the Netherlands where I live, we have these book weeks, and so we also have the week of the English book, and this is a little novella that came out for that occasion, so it's not available in other countries yet, but it is available in the Netherlands and I think Belgium. But it's in the same series as the Pumpkin Spice Cafe and the Cinnamon Bun Bookstore, so the Dream Harbor series, and it's just a little novella as an introduction to the whole series. So I read it in a readathon and I gave it 2.75 stars. I didn't like it that much because it's just a really short book, so you can't really explore, you know, a human relationship, but it was fun. It was all right. It was nice for the readathon because it wasn't something that took a lot of like brain power. The book follows Charlotte as she kisses her best friend Leo. Like, the book starts with them kissing, and she in the book realizes that she has been in love with him for quite some time, and then he is also in love with her, and then they try to make it work, but it all takes place in one day, which for me felt just, again, a little too fast-paced. It was fun, it was cute, but justice for Leo. That's all I can say. I didn't like Charlotte, actually. I didn't like the main character. Justice for Leo. Then the next book I read is Fracture Me, which is part 2.5 in the Shatter Me series. Again, it's a novella from Adam's POV. I don't want to go into the details because that would be spoilers for the whole series. I gave this 3 stars because I'm not a big fan of Adam, and he kept whining in the book, and I gave it 3 stars because it's just you know, just Sometimes a book is just The last book I want to talk about in this video is The Graveyard Shift by ML Rio. She's the author of If We Were Villains, which is one of my favorite books of all time. And this book came out, I think, a year ago, maybe 2. And so I really wanted to read that before her next book came out, which is Hot Wax. And it has already come out at this point, but I don't own it yet. This book follows 5 people who every single night come together at the graveyard to smoke a cigarette. And they all have a different background. This book follows all of them in their own POV, which was really interesting to me because you see the one story that's being told from all their perspectives, and it was very interesting to see everyone's background and how that related to the problem. And basically the problem of the novel is that they're smoking in the middle of the night, and then all of a sudden they notice this grave, a new grave that has been dug, and they're like, who is this for? Why is this grave here? And they go to investigate. And it was really, really fun to read because it's the type of horror that's just unsettling. Something is wrong, but you can't quite put a finger on it, but it's not like a jump scare type of horror, which I really enjoy because this is my favorite type of horror. The ending was a little sudden for me. It felt like it wasn't really fully wrapped up yet, and so I would have liked maybe 1 extra chapter to slow the pacing down a bit. But alas, we didn't get that, and so I rated this 3.25 stars. Good afternoon, or evening, or morning, or whenever you're watching this. For me, it's just afternoon, so good afternoon. I went to a book event yesterday. I didn't film anything there because there were a lot of people. I'm very awkward filming in public, so I didn't film anything there. But basically, we went to a bookstore after opening hours, and we got to bookshop with a little discount, and there were vendors who sold like stickers and book sleeves and bookmarks and candles and stuff like that. It was really fun, and since we got to buy books with a discount, I did, and I want to show you my book haul. So first off, I bought Somewhere Beyond the Sea, which is part 2 of The House on the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune, and this one follows like the events after part 1, so I won't go into detail about what it is about because I don't want to spoil or anything, but basically the story continues. Then the second book I got is The Cinnamon Bun Bookstore by Laurie Gilmore, which is the second part of the Dream Harbor series. Part 1, The Pumpkin Spice Cafe, is on my fall TBR, and I said in that video that all the books in this series, like once I eventually got them, would be on my fall TBR, and so this is the newest edition. I love the artwork on these covers. It's so cute. I'll insert a little clip, but it's so cute. The artwork is amazing. Then the third book I got is A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson. From what I've heard, this is basically a Dracula retelling. It involves vampires. It's a glittering tale of obsession, seduction, and power as told through the letters of Dracula's first wife, Constanta. Then the last 2 books I got are Dutch books. I'll talk about them still, but if you don't know Dutch, this might not be as interesting, so I'll keep it quick. The first one I got is Als de Zon Valt by Stijn de Vries. There's this Dutch TV program, Wie is de Mol, translated to Who is the Mole, I think. you could call it. I don't know if it's also like a international program, but it's a TV program. Spoilers for last year's season. He was the mole last year, and I really like him as a person, and he wrote this book, so that's why I wanted to get it. And I want to read more in Dutch because it's my native language, but my study is in English, so I read a lot of English and barely any Dutch. And that's why I want to read more Dutch. And this was a good option because I really like the author as a person. It's about two guys who strike up a friendship and they become very close, and their environment and their like families and school and friends don't really know, but I think it follows a homosexual couple, and I'm very interested to see how the story plays out. And I love the cover. The cover is so good. And then the last book I got is from an author that was also present at the event. I got my book signed by him, and I'm so happy. He was really, really nice, and it is called Liften naar de Hemel by Lex Palou. This has been on my TBR for half a year or something. I have it on my Kindle, but I just didn't have the physical copy. But because the author was at the event, I really wanted to get my physical copy there so I could get it signed. And I really, really want to read this soon. I want to go in blind, so I can't really tell you anything about the book, but if you really want to know what it is about, you could just look it up, I guess. I'm sorry, but I want to go in blind. I forgot to mention before, but I also got this really cute book sleeve. It's little otters, and they're so cute. I got it from a company named Magic and Books. I don't know if it's a company, it's like two people making these things. It's a handmade book sleeve and it's so adorable. From Magic and Books. They had a little stall at the event, and so I got this. I'm sorry, I keep showing you, but it's just too adorable. And it's a book sleeve and it fits a paperback, but it also fits my Kindle. I have another case for my Kindle, which my mom crocheted for me, and then I have my Kindle. But it's so cute. I can like alternate between these two, or put my Kindle in this and a book in this, and I'm just so happy with it. It was so cute. I'm gonna show you again. It's so adorable. I love otters. They're really cute. I actually completely forgot to film an outro yesterday, but I hope you enjoyed this video. These were all the books that I read in September and October, and my little book haul of the book event that I went to. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you in my next one. And for now, goodbye!